Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Letter 65, Seneca is explaining to us the Stoic view on causality and its relation to matter. What counts as a genuine cause? What counts as the first cause? And he very helpfully sets the Stoic point of view in relation to two other metaphysical points of view, both of which were incredibly important in ancient times and continue to remain so throughout modern times and modernity, and that would be the Aristotelian notion of four causes and the Platonic tradition, which brings in the idea or exemplar or model as a cause as well, at least is the way Aristotle and the Stoics interpreted Plato. And before we go into looking at that, I do want to point out that in this letter, Seneca speaks a little anachronistically about Aristotle first introducing three causes and then a fourth, but then Plato introducing a fifth cause. Because, of course, Plato precedes Aristotle, but we could take this as representing how Platonists are making sense out of the Aristotelian proposals of these four causes. And again, before we go into his discussion of those two great schools, he also tells us a little bit about what the Stoics believe as he's addressing his interlocutor Lucilius. He says, the adherents of our Stoic school say that in the world's nature there are two things from which everything comes into being. One of these is matter, which the Stoics conceived of as essentially inert, as having no movement or energy or shape of its own. And then cause, causa, which superimposes upon matter everything that matter is going to have or exhibit to us. He says, matter lays inert, a thing open to all possibilities, but cause, and then he says, that is reason. For the Stoics, reason is going to be the cause. Shapes matter and turns it in any direction it wants, producing it from it various works. And so then he says, for any given thing, there has to be something out of which it is made and something by which it is made. And this is a somewhat different point of view than that of, say, the Aristotelians, who Seneca will turn to in just a moment. But in a way, it's kind of similar to that of Plato, is it not? And if you think about Plato's own account, there is some room for a divine worker, at least in Republic, Book 10, and in the Timaeus. Now, putting all that aside, the next thing that Seneca does in this letter is go through the traditionally understood Aristotelian four causes. And as I pointed out, he actually says that there's three causes that Aristotle recognizes. The word cause is used in three ways. The first cause is the material itself, the matter, the materia in Latin. And a little bit later, when he's talking about these five causes, he will call that id ex quo, that out of which. So the matter, of course, for this book is paper, which is really wood put together in a different way. The matter for this tie is cloth, which is really threads of things woven together in a certain way, made from wool, or in this case, I imagine probably silk or something like that. I don't see a tag for it right away. And we could go on and on and on. The matter for this chalkboard is a kind of slate, perhaps. I don't really know what goes into this chalkboard as such. But you have matter, that which has been shaped, that which has been formed, that which has been acted upon, that which the thing is out of. Then you have, and Seneca is going to use several different terms here, the agent or maker. Actually, the first term that he uses is not artifex, but opifex, right? The maker, the one who does the work. Artifex, the one who actually fashions something. And this is id a quo in the summary that he's going to give here. That by which the thing comes to be. So again, we'll take the tie in the book and we'll use his other example of the statue in a moment. There was an entire production process that made this book what it was, and presumably the same thing with this tie as well, which is 100% silk, as I see. And so we could go on and say, well, the silk didn't make itself into this form. There had to be some sort of maker or production process that did that. Then we have the form, or the shape, if you like, the structure of it. And here he calls that id in quo, that in which the thing is. And so here we have to extend our thinking a little bit. How is it in the form, right? Well, this is in the shape of the form, right? It has been wrought in a certain way by the maker who took the material and produced that effect. And then we can go on and talk about a fourth cause, as Aristotle does. In fact, this is what Aristotle takes to be one of his main contributions to metaphysics, the purpose or end or good or goal, however you want to define it, id propter quod, that on account of which the thing has been done. And a little bit later, Seneca will say that there could be all sorts of different causes, right? It could be money, if you craft something to sell, or reputation, if you want to make a name for yourself, or reverence, if you fashion the thing as a gift for a temple, right? This is a reason why something is the way it is. And when it comes to things that are not artifacts, right, but rather things like us, organisms, we might talk about the final cause in a somewhat different way as the purpose that we're supposed to attain or achieve. And this is what Aristotle recognized. And so we can look at the example of the bronze statue that Aristotle himself used and which Seneca invokes here, right? Bronze is the first cause of the statue. You don't have a statue if you don't have something that it's made out of. Then the second cause is the craftsperson, the agent, the person who actually forms the statue. The third is the form, and he says quite interestingly, the statue would not be called a spear bearer or a youth tying a headband. These were popular modes, you could say, of statues back then, certain ways of doing it, just like we might say, thick tie, skinny tie, power tie. We've got all these descriptors, right? That is a form. And then we have the reason why it is produced, the purpose of making it. If that had not been there, it would not have been made. And here's what is motivating the craftsperson. It could just be the art itself, right? Now, Seneca goes on and says, Plato adds a fifth cause to this. So Aristotle's account, according to Seneca at this point, is not yet complete for explaining causality. What is the fifth cause that Plato adds? Well, it's the model, or another way of translating this, the pattern, or the idea, the exemplum in Latin. Example would work in the sense of a paradigm, right? The thing that it's modeled after. Id ad quod, the thing that you're looking to and trying to make that material thing that you're creating resemble. And Plato views these forms as something immaterial. So the way that Seneca reads this, he says, this is what the craftsman had in view when he made that which he intended to make. It doesn't matter whether he has an external model to cast his eyes upon or an internal one that he himself has conceived and set up within. At this point, it sounds a little bit different than what Plato has in mind as a form or idea. But then Seneca goes on to say something quite interesting. He tells us that God has these models of all things within himself, or whatever God is, and encompasses in his mind the numbers and measures of everything that is to be achieved. He's full of those shapes that Plato calls ideas, deathless, changeless, tireless. So for Seneca, within God's mind, these eternal ideas exist already, and the craftsperson, or Plato, when Plato's trying to describe what goes on, is talking about what's in the mind of God. Now, this is an interesting account, and in a way you could put together Plato and Aristotle's two accounts together, and you would encompass a lot of what we call causality. Seneca does not remain content with this, however, and says that there's a problem here. Either they have too few causes, or they have too many causes. And why would there be too few? He says, from the Stoic point of view, we're not taking every single thing into account that goes into making a thing what it is, because we've left out two factors. In addition to all these other causes, we would also need to think about time and about motion. And then he dismisses that because his intent is not actually to introduce a whole bunch of other causes. He wants to reduce it all to one cause, and that cause is what he calls creative reason. That's a good way to translate it. Ratio faciens, the reason, ratio, that makes, that shapes, that forms, faciens, right, from facere. And that, he says, is God, Deus. This is essentially what in Greek they would call the logos spermatikos. And he goes on to say that God has all of these things, all of these aspects, which put these other causes into a kind of context. So he says, God, here we go. All the things you've mentioned are not multiple individual causes, but dependent on one, the one that makes, that is God. So you say that form is a cause. Form is, according to Seneca, what the craftsman imposes on his work. It's part of the cause, but it's not the cause itself. So Aristotle is wrong in calling it a cause. The model, Plato's idea, is necessary to the craftsman, but it's necessary as an instrument, so it's not a cause. Somebody might say the aim of the craftsman is a cause. Even supposing it is a cause, Seneca will say it's not the efficient cause, but what he calls supervenient, and that's just translating the Latin, superveniens, cause, right? Something added on top of it. It adds a little explanatory power, but it's not why the thing is the way it is. For Seneca, why it is the way that it is because God formed it that way. That is the primary cause. So he goes on and he says, these causes are innumerable. What we're looking for is the generic cause. So God, or creative reason, winds up being the explanatory principle for everything. And all of these other ways of understanding causality, from Seneca's point of view, which he's taking to be the Orthodox Stoic point of view, are merely accessory, merely modes of what is going on here in and as a result of the mind of God.